Hello, I'm Nick, this is Amateur Minis, and today we're painting this guy. I've always wanted to paint a T'au ever since I started the hobby, so back in March I picked this model up and I decided to paint it up a couple weeks ago. I decided on a black and yellow color scheme, so I primed the model in Citadel Chaos Black to start, and then I took matte black from Army Painter and put a thin coat of that all across the entire model. And now what I'm doing is just picking out the metallic parts and painting them in lead belcher. As I said, I'm going for a black and yellow color scheme here, so to start out, because yellow has such horrible coverage, I started with a white base coat over all the parts that I'm going to be painting yellow, just so I don't have to do as many coats later on. After I finished all the white base coats, I moved on to the yellow, going over my previous white base coats, and I had to do many coats on this. I don't even know how many I did. It was a lot of coats. And I wanted to get a nice flat, even color before I moved on to the highlighting stage. Moving on to the edge highlighting stage, I started with the black armor panels and I moved to the yellow afterwards. So you can see here I'm using a dark gray to just catch those edges that are going to catch some light, and then I moved up to a lighter gray afterwards, catching the very edge and sharp corners to get a much brighter contrast there. After I finished all the edge highlighting on the black armor panels, I moved on to edge highlighting and just highlighting in general. A lot of it's not on the edge really, but it's just kind of there to add some more contrast in there and not just be so flat. So I started with a lighter yellow and then I moved on to a much brighter yellow to just catch those very sharp corners on the very edges there. After I finished the edge highlighting stage, I moved on to some Nuln Oil on the metallic parts. I didn't use a whole ton of Nuln Oil, I didn't want it to look dirty, I just wanted to bring out those recesses a little bit more on the metallic parts. So I finished all my painting that I wanted to do for the black and the yellow and the metallics. So to fix the black a little bit, because it looked a little bit flat, didn't have a lot of texture to it, I added some micro scratches here and there. They're not amazing, but it's just a little bit to add some nice texture and detail to it. Now we're approaching to being done with the painting part of this model, but I wanted to paint the head yellow. I wasn't sure at the beginning if I wanted to, but then I decided I was going to paint it yellow, so I started, like I did with the other yellow areas, with a white base coat of Corax White, and then moving on to my yellow, and then the yellow highlights afterwards. Finally, to finish off the model, I decided to do my first ever OSL. I've practiced a little bit before, but this is my first time ever doing it on a model. So I started with a base coat of this dark blue here in the areas that are going to be emitting light, and then after I base coated it with that blue, I took a lighter blue and glazed over that area, and then dry brushed that same light blue on the areas that are going to be catching light. Finally, I took a white dry brush and dry brushed the areas that are going to be catching the most light and the brightest light, and then to end it off, I took a white streak down the areas that are emitting the light just to give it a more of a glow effect and make it a little bit brighter in those areas where it's going to be coming out of. So for this base, I was looking at doing a Mars type base with some red sand, but then I decided I would like to try and use resin. So to use the resin, I wanted to make like a stream, and because the model's legs are kind of spread out, I decided he would be walking over like a stream that's going through a forest. So I started with taking this foam here that I had laying around, just cutting it up, and laying it down, getting a nice like area that would surround the resin, because I needed to raise it up so I could pour the resin into it. So to create a better transition between the base and the foam on the base of the model, I decided to use toilet paper and watered down craft glue, which creates a nice little modeling paste that you can use to create texture and fill gaps on your terrain pieces and models and bases and such. So I took this, very watered down, takes a while to dry, but you just kind of smush it all together and then it fills in the gaps that you need it to. After I finished putting all these rocks on, I took Armageddon Dunes texture paint and put it across the entire thing to make it look more like dirt and give it more of a better texture that would be more natural. After I had everything on there that I was going to be painting, I primed it in black and then took a brown and watered it down quite a bit and just brushed the entire thing brown to give it a nice dirt color. After I had my brown all the way across, I took some greens and some lighter browns to give some grass on there, and then add some more texture to the browns that I had on there previously. I then took a smaller brush and grabbed a dark gray to pick out all of the rocks that were around the base, just to give it some more color and bring it out and add some more dynamic to the base. And now here comes the fun part. We get to move on to the resin. So I have this Gorilla Glue 2-part epoxy resin that just comes in a syringe. You just push it out and it comes in equal parts. And I just have these plastic shot glasses that I push them into, and it doesn't pour super well. So I took this popsicle stick that I used to stir it and just kind of poured it out with like a spoon or something, and got it to just go all the way around. It took a little bit of time, but I eventually got it to where I wanted it to be. Now, if you know anything about resin, you'll know that it usually has bubbles in it if you don't do it right, and I don't know how to do this, so mine definitely had some bubbles in it. So I took a match and just used it to pop those bubbles around the area, just to give it a more clean effect. So I let that dry overnight, and then I came back to it the next day. I was able to take all the tape off, and then I cut it down and filed it down to where I wanted it to be, so it wasn't hanging over too much and didn't have too weird of a shape on it. Now I'm taking these grass tufts and adding them around to put some more variation and color onto the base. And now finally, to finish it off, I'm taking some more green, some lighter green, just to bring some more color out. It was just looking a little too dull for me, so I took a little bit of a brighter green and just dragged it around on top of where my previous green was, just to bring it more color and vibrance. So that was about the last thing that I did to this model. I added some finishing touches on the model itself and then on the base as well. And here is the final T'au. Overall, I'm happy with how this model turned out. Definitely my best model I've ever painted, in my opinion. I was able to try out OSL that I've never done before, which I think turned out really well for my first time ever doing it, and it was just a very beginner way of doing it. And also the epoxy and the base, it's my best base I've ever done. I've never really tried anything too out there besides one of my orc bases and then one of my space wolves bases before. But this is definitely something that I just took to the next level and just kind of tried my best on and just put a lot of effort into. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed watching me try out OSL and epoxy for the first time. If you did enjoy, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.